The execution was scheduled to begin in exactly 60 seconds. And the entire galaxy was watching. Across thousands of systems, screens flickered to life. Trading hubs fell silent. War rooms paused mid-strategy. Even pirate networks tuned in. Because this wasn't just an execution. This was the fall of an empire. High above the burning capital of Virelia Prime, Dominion warships loomed like iron gods. Their hulls blocked out the sun, casting long shadows across shattered towers and cracked marble courtyards below. At the center of that courtyard, kneeling in chains, was Queen Seralith Vila. Her once silver ceremonial armor was scorched and fractured. One wing hung limp. The other was pinned by a gravity restraint that forced her to bow her head toward the broken stone. She did not bow. She stared forward. Dominion banners hung from her palace spires. Her royal guard lay still around the courtyard's edge. Her armies were gone. Her fleet was debris drifting in orbit. And the conqueror who had promised mercy stood behind her. Overlord Kareth of the Dominion stepped into frame, towering in black warplate etched with symbols of defeated civilizations. His voice boomed through planetary transmitters. "Let this moment be recorded," he declared, as the day resistance died. The broadcast zoomed in on the Queen. Billions saw her blood against white marble. Billions saw her kneeling. Kareth circled her slowly. "You had every opportunity to surrender," he said. "Instead, you chose pride." Seralith lifted her chin despite the crushing gravity field. "You mistake freedom for pride," she replied. A murmur rippled across galactic channels. Even defeated, she did not tremble. Kareth stopped in front of her. "Your people will watch," he said softly, almost kindly. "And they will learn." Behind him, Dominion soldiers leveled weapons toward the gathered civilians forced to witness the spectacle. No one spoke. No one moved. Somewhere in the crowd stood diplomats from neutral species. Traders. Observers. And one human. The countdown appeared in the corner of the broadcast. 30 seconds. Kareth raised his execution blade. Its edge shimmered with contained plasma. "This is what happens," he announced, "when empires forget their place." 20 seconds. Seralith closed her eyes for just a breath. Not in fear. In defiance. 15 seconds. The Dominion soldiers tightened their formation. 10 seconds. The galaxy leaned forward. 5, 4, 3. Hey. It wasn't amplified. It wasn't shouted. But it cut through the courtyard like a cracking glass. Kareth paused mid-motion. The soldiers shifted. Cameras recalibrated. From the civilian crowd, a figure stepped forward. Not armored. Not guarded. Just a human man in a worn, dark jacket, hands visible at his sides. He moved with deliberate calm, boots crunching over shattered marble. Dominion rifles tracked him instantly. Kareth's eyes narrowed. "You are not part of this," the Overlord said. The human stopped between the Queen and the raised blade. For a moment, there was only smoke drifting through sunlight. Then the human spoke. "You're done." The courtyard froze. Across the galaxy, analysts scrambled to identify him. No diplomatic insignia. No military markings. Just a civilian. Kareth tilted his head. "And who," he asked slowly, "are you?" The human shrugged slightly. "Doesn't matter." A Dominion officer barked, "Remove him." But Kareth raised a hand. He studied the human carefully. Humans were neutral in this conflict. They had issued no alliance. Filed no protest. Moved no fleets. They had watched. The human met the Overlord's gaze without flinching. "Step aside," Kareth warned. The human didn't move. Behind him, Queen Seralith stared up in confusion. "You misunderstand," Kareth said, voice lowering. "This is war." The human glanced briefly at the cameras hovering above. "No," he replied quietly. "This is theater." A ripple of unease moved through Dominion ranks. Kareth's grip tightened on his weapon. "You stand alone," he said. The human's expression didn't change. "Do I?" For the first time since the invasion began. The Overlord hesitated. And across orbit, something unseen shifted. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. The Overlord's execution blade hummed inches from Queen Seralith's throat. Dominion rifles remained trained on the human's chest. The galaxy held its breath. Then the Dominion command channel exploded with orders. "Remove him. Terminate immediately. Make an example." But Overlord Kareth did not give the order. He kept his eyes locked on the human. "You are Terran," Kareth said slowly. The man nodded once. You are not allied with the Varelian Empire. No. You are not under Dominion jurisdiction. Correct. Then explain, Kareth said, voice turning colder, why you stand in my victory. The human's gaze flicked briefly to the kneeling queen. Then to the civilians behind him. Then upward, toward the broadcast drones hovering like silent witnesses. You made it public, he said. Kareth frowned. And that makes it everyone's business. A murmur spread across interstellar diplomatic channels. Humanity was known for many things: adaptability, resilience, unnerving patience. But above all, they were known for something else: restraint. For decades, they had avoided entanglement in foreign wars. They traded, negotiated, observed. They did not intervene. Not openly. Kareth gave a small, dismissive laugh. You mistake spectacle for invitation. The human shook his head. No. I recognize cruelty when it's turned into entertainment. Dominion soldiers tightened their formation. Weapons primed. Energy capacitors whined softly. You are unarmed, Kareth noted. The human spread his hands slightly. Yep. You stand alone. The man tilted his head. Do I? The Overlord's patience snapped. Fire. The nearest Dominion soldier squeezed the trigger. The plasma round hit the human square in the chest. The broadcast feed flickered as thermal bloom filled the frame. Gasps rippled across 1,000 systems. Smoke curled upward. Then cleared. The human was still standing. His jacket smoldered, burned through at the impact point, revealing something beneath. Not armor. Not metal. A faint, shimmering distortion in the air around him. Kareth's eyes narrowed. Personal shielding, one Dominion officer muttered. Illegal outside military deployment. The human brushed Ash off his shoulder. That was rude. Dominion targeting systems recalibrated. Multiple Lock-ONS engaged. Kareth raised his blade again. Overwhelmed the shield. Before the order could transmit, every Dominion rifle in the courtyard powered down. Simultaneously, their energy cores went dark. Confused soldiers checked their weapons. System error. Power loss. My interface is unresponsive. Above the capital city, something shimmered in orbit. Cloaked shapes decloaking one by one. Long, angular silhouettes. Terran. The broadcast feed automatically shifted to wide orbital view. Human warships filled the upper atmosphere. Silent. Precise. Positioned. They had not arrived. They had been there. Hidden. Watching. Across Dominion command decks, alarms erupted. Multiple Terran vessels detected. Targeting arrays compromised. Our fire control systems are being overridden. Screens went black. Weapons grids failed. Communications scrambled into static. Kareth felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. How many ships? He demanded. A trembling Dominion analyst transmitted the answer across open channels before he could stop himself. Not the full Terran fleet. A pause. Just the nearest response group. The implication settled like a weight across the galaxy. This wasn't escalation. This was proximity. The human looked up briefly at the sky, as if checking on something routine. Then he looked back at Kareth. You said this was war, he said calmly. Kareth's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You claimed neutrality. The human nodded. We were. A Dominion cruiser in orbit attempted to bring its main cannon online. It failed. Hard reboot initiated. Failed again. Then the ship's reactor output was quietly capped at minimum safe levels, remotely. No explosion. No violence. Just control. Kareth realized something chilling. The Terrans weren't attacking. They were editing the battlefield. You would start a war over this? Kareth demanded. The human shook his head slowly. No. He gestured lightly toward the kneeling queen, and the civilians forced to watch. We start wars for civilians. The words echoed through every open transmission channel. Across the courtyard, Dominion soldiers shifted uneasily. Their armor HUDs flickered. Targeting reticles failed. Command uplinks dropped. One by one. Systematically. The Overlord lowered his blade slightly. You think this display intimidates us? The human gave him a long, steady look. No. He glanced at the hovering broadcast drones. I think the display already happened. And for the first time since the invasion began, the Dominion understood something critical. Humanity had not intervened when the fleets clashed in deep space. They had not intervened when territories were seized. They had not intervened when armies fought armies. But the moment conquest turned into spectacle, the moment execution became entertainment, humanity stood up. Kareth tightened his grip on the blade. You risk interstellar conflict. The human's expression didn't change. You already started one. Above them, another Terran ship decloaked. Then another. Perfectly positioned. Perfectly still. Waiting. The Overlord finally understood the mistake. The humans hadn't rushed here. They hadn't scrambled fleets in panic. They had been present. Prepared. Watching the line. And the Dominion had just crossed it. No alarms sounded from the Terran ships. No battle horns. No grand declaration of war. That was the first thing Dominion analysts noticed. The human fleet in orbit did not posture. It did not threaten. It simply operated. Above Virelia Prime, Dominion command vessels attempted emergency combat protocols. Nothing responded. Weapons grids remained locked in standby. Missile bays refused to cycle. Shield harmonics were overridden and capped at minimal output. Entire tactical displays began displaying a single Terran symbol. System access restricted. Across the courtyard, Dominion officers barked overlapping orders. Manual override. Switch to auxiliary. Disconnect from central command. But it didn't matter. Their systems weren't jammed. They were being administratively denied. The human in the courtyard lowered his hands casually. He didn't look at the sky. He didn't issue commands aloud. He didn't need to. Kareth stared at him. You had this planned. The human shrugged faintly. We had contingencies. Behind him, Queen Serelith slowly rose to one knee now that the execution blade no longer pressed toward her throat. She stared at the Terran ships in orbit, sleek, angular silhouettes holding position with unnerving stillness. They weren't firing. They weren't advancing. They were simply placed perfectly. Kareth activated a secure Dominion channel. Only static responded. He tried a direct line to his flagship. The response came back cold. Command authority suspended. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. You dare interfere in Dominion sovereignty? The human finally stepped half a pace closer. Let's clarify something, he said calmly. You were conquering. We stayed out of it. He gestured slightly toward the broadcast drones still hovering overhead. You turned it into theater. Around the galaxy, species who had quietly tolerated Dominion expansion were now watching something far more unsettling unfold. This wasn't a clash of fleets. This wasn't mutual escalation. This was one side discovering the other had already solved the problem. Dominion ground troops attempted to power up heavy artillery positioned at the palace perimeter. The cannons rose halfway. Then froze. Their control interfaces replaced with Terran script. A Dominion technician shouted, "They're inside our firmware." The human glanced briefly toward the artillery units without turning his head. "They're safe," he said. "Safe." Kareth snarled. "From you." Above the capital, a Dominion cruiser attempted to disengage and jump to hyperspace. Its drive core spooled. Then shut down. Cleanly. No damage. Just denial. Across galactic military networks, simulations began recalculating. The terrifying part wasn't the Terran fleet size. It wasn't overwhelming numbers. It was synchronization. Every Dominion system failure was timed. Measured. Non-lethal. The human forces weren't attacking infrastructure. They were isolating it. One Dominion commander shouted over an open channel. "They're not targeting weapons, they're targeting authority." And that was the moment it clicked. The Terrans weren't winning by force. They were removing the Dominion's ability to command. Kareth looked back at the human. "You think this makes you righteous?" The human's expression didn't shift. "It makes us responsible." Behind him, Serelith slowly stood. Her damaged wing trembled, but she remained upright. For the first time since her fleet fell, she was no longer alone. Dominion soldiers began attempting manual weapon discharge. Triggers pulled. Nothing fired. Armor HUDs flickered and went dark. Visors defaulted to transparent mode. Even their targeting reticles vanished. One by one, Dominion troops began lowering their weapons, not by choice, but because the weapons no longer obeyed them. In orbit, Dominion ships were being boarded. Not violently. Airlocks overridden. Internal gravity controlled. Security doors sealed. Terran boarding teams moved with surgical efficiency. No explosions. No hull breaches. Just precise containment. Kareth's voice dropped lower, colder. You are declaring war. The human met his gaze evenly. No. He nodded toward the civilians forced into the courtyard. We're ending a spectacle. A Terran tactical officer's voice finally came through an open channel, calm and professional. Dominion command network neutralized. Fleet assets contained. Casualty projections minimal. Minimal. Not annihilation. Not devastation. Containment. Kareth realized something that chilled him far more than open warfare would have. The Terrans weren't improvising. They weren't reacting emotionally. They had modeled this scenario. Prepared for it. Waited for a trigger. And that trigger had not been invasion. It had not been conquest. It had been public execution. The human looked up briefly at the sky again. Then back at Kareth. You could have taken the throne quietly, he said. History would have judged you eventually. His eyes hardened slightly. But you wanted applause. Across the courtyard, Dominion command insignias on officers' armor flickered and disappeared. Ranks erased. Authority stripped. On every Dominion flagship, one identical message now displayed. Military sovereignty revoked, pending review. Kareth felt the weight of it. This wasn't defeat. It was disarmament. Across the galaxy, fear began shifting direction. Not toward humanity's firepower. But toward their restraint. The human took one final step forward. You don't get to make slaughter into entertainment, he said quietly. Behind him, Terran ships held perfect formation. Weapons still unfired. But every Dominion system. Under control. And for the first time since the invasion began. The Dominion was no longer the one dictating the outcome. The first Dominion ship surrendered at exactly 3 minutes past the failed execution. Not because it was destroyed. Because its command crew found themselves locked out of every tactical system. On Varelia Prime, the sky filled with Terran descent craft, matte black hulls cutting silently through smoke-stained clouds. They did not fire on the city. They did not strafe the palace. They landed precisely at pre-calculated Dominion positions. Across the courtyard, Dominion soldiers attempted regrouping formations. Fall back to perimeter delta. Re-establish hardline communication. But their command frequencies were gone. Their encrypted channels replaced with a calm Terran voice. Dominion forces are contained. Lay down arms. Medical aid will be provided. Resistance will result in immobilization. Immobilization. Not elimination. Kareth watched as his perimeter artillery units powered down one by one. Hover tanks froze mid-maneuver. Dropships stalled in the air and gently descended under remote control. The human in front of him hadn't moved. He didn't need to. Behind him, Queen Serelith slowly straightened to her full height. Her damaged wing trembled, but she stood tall. The gravity restraints around her wrists flickered. Then disengaged with a heavy metallic crack. They fell to the stone at her feet. She flexed her hands slowly, staring at the human. You came uninvited, she said quietly. He gave a small nod. You didn't look like you were hosting. In orbit, Dominion cruisers were being boarded in synchronized waves. Terran teams moved corridor by corridor, sealing armories, isolating officers, overriding command cores. No hull breaches. No decompression. No unnecessary casualties. Just surgical takeover. By minute 6, Dominion Fleet Command was effectively blind. By minute 8, every heavy weapon on the planet had been disabled. By minute 9, Dominion officers were being escorted into containment fields. Kareth tried one final override. He initiated a localized armor purge protocol, an old Dominion safeguard that would trigger a power surge through every soldier's suit and reset control authority. It failed instantly. His armor's internal display flashed red. External administrative lock detected. The human's eyes met his. You really should have done your research. Kareth stepped back instinctively. You risk galactic escalation. The human shook his head once. No. He gestured upward toward orbit. We demonstrated capability. Another Terran officer's voice came through the open channel. Planetary resistance neutralized. Civilian zones secured. Dominion command structure dismantled. Dismantled. Not crushed. Dismantled. Across the courtyard, Dominion soldiers found their armor joints stiffening, movement restricted but not harmful. Weapons gently magnetized to the ground. No one was bleeding. No one was burning. They were simply done. The Overlord felt something colder than fear. He felt irrelevance. The human stepped aside slightly, allowing Queen Serelith to move forward. She stood before Kereth now. Not kneeling. Not chained. "You promised my people submission," she said evenly. Kereth tried to stand tall, but containment fields shimmered faintly around him, invisible yet absolute. "You are alive because of them," he spat. Serelith glanced briefly at the Terran ships in orbit. "Yes." The human spoke calmly beside her. "You were winning the war." Kereth glared. "Until you interfered." The human's voice didn't change. "No." He looked around at the broadcast drones still transmitting to every star system. "You lost when you scheduled the execution." Across the galaxy, analysts were already updating strategic models. Terran doctrine was no longer theoretical. It was defined. Humanity did not react to conquest alone. They reacted to cruelty broadcast as celebration. At exactly 10 minutes after the first shot was fired at the human, Dominion Fleet Command transmitted unconditional surrender. The message echoed across open frequencies. "We acknowledge Terran containment authority. We stand down." The courtyard fell silent. Smoke drifted between shattered columns. Dominion soldiers were escorted away in orderly lines. Medical teams, Terran and Varelian alike, began treating the wounded on both sides. No victory chants. No banners raised. No triumphant speech. Just control. The human finally exhaled slowly. He looked at Serelith. "You good?" She studied him carefully. "You intervened in a war that was not yours." He shrugged lightly. "It became ours." "How?" He glanced toward the sky, where the Terran fleet held formation. "When you made civilians watch." Kereth struggled against invisible containment fields. "You think this ends the Dominion?" The human turned back toward him. "No." He tilted his head slightly. "This ends your ability to do this again." In orbit, Dominion reactors were being capped. Military AI cores isolated. Command encryption keys revoked. Not destroyed. Revoked. Because this was not annihilation. It was correction. The Queen stepped back toward her palace steps. For the first time since the invasion began, she stood unbound. And the galaxy understood something far more unsettling than Terran firepower. Humanity did not need to destroy an empire to end it. They only needed to remove its power to dominate. The Terran fleet remained in orbit. Silent. Perfectly still. Waiting for the next move. But the Dominion had none left to make. The galaxy expected fire. They expected annexation. They expected Terran banners rising over Varelia Prime. That was how wars ended. With new rulers. New empires. New borders. Instead, the Terran fleet did nothing. For 3 days, their ships remained in high orbit, holding precise defensive formation while Varelian engineers restored basic infrastructure. Dominion forces were disarmed. Command structures dissolved. Military AI cores removed under Terran supervision. No executions. No mass imprisonment. Just removal of capacity. Across interstellar networks, one phrase circulated among analysts. They didn't conquer the Dominion. They uninstalled it. Overlord Kereth was transferred to a neutral tribunal station under joint galactic oversight. His armor was removed. His rank erased. His authority reduced to testimony. And the footage he had intended as spectacle became evidence. At the Galactic Assembly Summit convened weeks later, tension hung heavier than any fleet formation. Representatives from over 200 species filled the chamber. Some fearful. Some relieved. All recalculating. Queen Serelith entered without escort. Her wings still scarred. Her posture unbroken. Moments later, a single Terran representative took the central platform. Not the human who had stepped into the courtyard. He had already left. Returned to civilian status. No medal. No ceremony. Just gone. The representative spoke calmly. "We did not intervene in a war." A pause. "We intervened in a broadcast." Murmurs spread. A Hekthari delegate rose. "You dismantled a sovereign military." "Yes," the Terran replied evenly. "After it used civilians as stage props." A Dominion remnant ambassador protested, "You exceeded proportional response." The Terran met his gaze. "We disabled weapons. We preserved lives. We prevented escalation. Proportionality is not measured by pride." Silence followed. Then Queen Serelith spoke. "My empire stands because of them," she said. The Terran representative shook his head gently. "Your empire stands because you resisted. We only ensured your people survived to see it." A new doctrine was entered into galactic law that day, not authored solely by humanity, but supported by nearly every species who had watched the execution feed. It became known unofficially as the Spectacle Clause. Any military force that weaponized public execution or civilian humiliation as entertainment would forfeit its military sovereignty under collective enforcement. It was not aimed at conquest. It was aimed at cruelty. Across former Dominion territories, liberated systems were given self-governance oversight. Dominion war industries were dismantled, not destroyed, converted into civilian infrastructure under supervision. No empire replaced them. No Terran expansion followed. The Terran fleet withdrew gradually, system by system, leaving only a single patrol group at the edge of Varelian space. Not occupying. Not ruling. Just present. Weeks later, Queen Serelith stood again in her restored courtyard. The marble still bore cracks from battle. She had ordered them left unrepaired. A reminder. A Terran patrol ship glided silently across the upper atmosphere. Small compared to fleets. But unmistakable. A symbol. Not of dominance. Of threshold. A Varelian advisor approached her carefully. "Do you trust them?" he asked. Serelith watched the ship for a long moment. "They did not save my throne," she said. "They saved my people." In a quiet district far from royal palaces, the human who had stepped into the execution circle sat at a street cafe, wearing the same worn jacket, now repaired. No security. No ceremony. Just another civilian. A passerby recognized him. "You stopped a war," the Varelian said softly. The human shook his head. "No." He looked up at the sky, where the Terran patrol ship drifted like a distant star. "I stopped a show." Across the galaxy, military academies updated their doctrines. Strategists revised their projections. Because a new constant had been defined. Humanity did not react to ambition alone. They did not police borders. They did not chase expansion. But when power was used to humiliate the powerless, when violence was turned into spectacle, they stood. And when humans stood, the outcome changed. Not through annihilation. Not through conquest. But through removal of the ability to dominate. The Dominion still existed. But it would never again broadcast an execution. The Varelian Empire endured. Not as a vassal. Not as a protectorate. But as a sovereign people who remembered who stepped forward when the blade fell. And somewhere beyond visible orbit, Terran ships remained ready. Quiet. Watchful. Because the galaxy had learned something irreversible. Humanity does not seek war. But they do define lines. And crossing them changes everything.